Welcome to the Redeemed Vision podcast, where we bring sight to the blind and freedom to those enslaved by our pornified culture. Here, we dive into hard but important topics such as pornography, sexual identity, true freedom, real love, and living marriage well. Go deep with us as we uncover what Redeemed Vision means for each of us living in the world today. Come to know yourself, the power of redemption through Jesus Christ, the joy of laughter, and how to live in gratitude and wonder. This is Redeemed Vision.
Hello there. This is Steve Pokorny of the Redeemed Vision podcast. It's an honor to have you. This is a division, shall we say, or a work of the Freedom Coaching Foundation Incorporated, helping to get a lot of word out about that there is good news. And I promise that today you're going to hear some good news, and I'm very excited for what is coming up. If you're unaware, also, this is an outreach of the work we do with Freedom Coaching, and Freedom Coaching is one-to-one mentoring designed to help both men and women to learn how to see who have been blinded by the pornified culture through a transformation of mind, heart, and vision. And I encourage you to check out freedom-coaching.net, where you can take a look at all the work that's going on there. Another sponsor that we have is called CathoCast, and there's over 2 decades of experience that's happened here of recordings for podcasts, for Catholic conferences that can't be found anywhere else in the world. There's a very low cost of $9.95 a month that's going to help you to develop the gift of yourself and discover very practical ways to live, to encounter God and to do his divine will in your life. Another sponsor for this podcast is Voyage Comics, and a lot of Christian media is pretty subpar. Hopefully this is not on that list. Voyage Comics is not that, and this provides amazing stories rooted firmly in the Catholic faith anyone can pick up and enjoy, and you'll find a variety of stories on there that you can't find anywhere else. And you by purchasing subscription there, it helps also to support the Redeemed Vision podcast. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, that the Redeemed Vision podcast is an outreach of the Freedom Coaching Foundation Incorporated. And if God has put in your heart to support this important mission, I encourage you to support us financially. So your gift helps support those clients in need of a scholarship, as well to help us spread this critical message and develop literally some life-saving messages. So just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart and all those who are involved in this mission for your support. And I encourage you also, if it's on the platform, to like, to subscribe, to hit the bell, and please, on your own social media, to share this podcast and our other ones, so we can get the word out about these very important topics. The world is lost in many, many ways. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you our topic today. And you know, I want to do a little word association as we get into this. When you hear the word sports, what do you hear? Do you hear exciting, competition, boredom? Oh, total waste of time, right? This may surprise you, but the Catholic Church has a very favorable view of sports, going so far as to say that sports are important for human educational and spiritual growth. Interested? Maybe. Maybe you don't believe me. Well, I have a guest who would like to maybe change your mind or maybe encourage you, right? To share with you a little bit of his heart and how he's working to integrate sports into his life and encourage others to do the same. I want to introduce Bruce Wawrzyniak. He is the founder and host of Catholic Sports Radio, one of the members of our team for Freedom Coaching. I never knew this existed. I would have listened years ago because I like sports. Yeah, I know I'm tipping my hand on this, right? This is a podcast that's run every week for 5.5 years. Amazing. And features interviews with Catholic guests about the intersection of their faith life and sports life. So yes, Catholicism runs deep in the sporting world, and we're going to dig into that. He's an Oblate to the St. Leo Abbey in Central Florida. He's been a speaker at both the 2nd and 3rd Global Congress on Sport and Christianity. I definitely want to hear more about that. Bruce has worked in the Olympic movement and in the National Hockey League and continues to do sports broadcasting for 2 different sports at the University of Tampa. Well, without any further ado, Bruce Wawrzyniak, welcome to the Redeemed Vision podcast.
Thank you so much, Steve. Glad to be here. Looking forward to this.
Dude, an honor to have you. And let's just jump right in here. So why sports? Why are you dedicating a portion of your life shining a light on what what some people consider just to be a game? Why?
Well, a few reasons. First and foremost is I felt called to it, and we can talk about that story, but sports is something that has been such a big part of my life as long as I can remember. So I'm talking about being a kid and just being a sports fan. I'm talking about being a youth and playing sports. And then, as you just mentioned in my intro, working in sports professionally as a career. And so it's something that I've just been around so much. And as we unpack all this, it became very clear to me that, as you said, the Catholic Church looks favorably upon sports, and there very much can and should be an overlap of faith and sports.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. So, okay, so I want to dig in here a little bit. We're going to go from, we'll come from this angle. So, growing up, right? What was your first? I don't know. Let's see if we can go here. I'm going to draw you out here. What was your first experience of sports growing up? If you can, or one of the most memorable experiences of sports. Let's go there.
I'm going to go with this story. I lived in Buffalo, New York. We were huge hockey fans. Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to also date myself. This was at a time when tape recorders were the thing. And we would sit there and watch hockey games. I'm talking about the whole family, but let's just say, for purposes of this example, myself, my brother, my dad. And I became such a devoted hockey fan that I would literally sit and watch the Sabres games and hold the microphone up to the television and record the audio. And, they're cheering, shh, I'm taping this. So I just remember, scrapbooks and writing down my own little stats and sticker books, anything and everything that I could get my hands on to be, I'm going to say, a Buffalo Sabres fan, but ultimately, a really big hockey fan. And that just, it was very funny that I was that devoted to it. And when you're into it the way I was, to think that someday you end up working for the team, at that point, it's like, that's a dream come true. And I did realize that is who I worked for 10 seasons. But those childhood memories, my dad would make us an ice rink in the backyard in the wintertime. We'd go play hockey in the backyard. Ultimately, when I was working for the Sabres, it got to the point where it's like, oh, so now we'll just play hockey on their ice. And we would bring our stuff, and at lunchtime, instead of eating, we'd go out on the ice and play hockey. So that's a childhood memory that, as you can tell, I'm very fond of. I have great recall about those days, sitting and watching those games. And of course, it really kind of goes to the history of the game and thinking about whatever happened to the California Golden Seals. And, oh my gosh, remember those crazy uniforms that the Vancouver Canucks wore and things like that.
That's amazing. The only, I think the only connection I have with the Buffalo Sabres is the movie Bruce Almighty. That's pretty much all that I got. And Bruce, I don't get it. Like, maybe for those here, we're gonna nerd out here a little bit because I don't know what it is. I mean, the old joke goes, right, I went to a fight and a hockey game broke out, right? Yep. And welcome to Dad Joke Central here. Like, I don't get it. Help me out here, because like hockey, there's fights, there's men who smash into glass, and I can't get into it. Maybe just because I didn't grow up with it. I mean, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and I think there was, oh man, I can't even remember. I do remember going to one like minor league game.
Cleveland Barons. The Cleveland Barons.
That's what it was. Yeah. And I bought one of the foam. It was a foam puck head. I was a puck head, right? I had that. I remember getting the cheese head for the Packers, right? But that's obviously not hockey. So what was your did Sabre? I don't even know. Sabres, did they ever make it to the finals? What's a memorable game of watching Sabres?
Well, there's a few different questions there. They did make it to the finals in 1974-75, which was very, very early in the franchise's existence. And so at the time, they were going up against the Broad Street Bullies, which is the Philadelphia Flyers, and the Flyers won the cup. But, that was very, very, very significant, because here's a team that had only been in existence for 5 years, and already they're in the Stanley Cup Finals. They went again in 1999, 2000, and lost to the Dallas Stars on a very, very, very controversial goal. And I was
Uh-oh.
at that game as a fan. I had just stopped working from them. And because I had been around it so much, I was in a perfect position. The seats were perfect. I was right on the goal line, and I saw and I looked down and I yelled, "He was in the crease." And people who were with me were like, "Okay, well, this stinks. We lost." And like, come on, don't make a big deal of it. Like, let's go home. Let's be good sports. And the next morning I'm being woken up with, "Bruce, you were right. It is all over the radio this morning that there's this huge controversy that he was in the crease." And I didn't want to say I told you so, but to this day, there are still people that will talk about, they just say no goal. That's kind of like wide right, in Buffalo. They remember the field goal that was missed in the Super Bowl and the Bills lost because the field goal was wide right. And they remember no goal in the Stanley Cup Finals because of Brett Hull being in the crease.
Listen, I'm not going to say that Buffalo's cursed, but it's been a rough go. But listen, I can't speak too much, and I'm going to go off a little bit off my own history. Being from Cleveland, I think my personal opinion is everybody should be Catholic in Cleveland, because we all know how to suffer, and we know how to suffer badly, right? That's the theology of suffering really helps on there, right? So, some of my stories I remember being, I think it was 1935 after you had League Park was there, and then you had this huge monstrosity of a stadium, 80,000 seats, municipal stadium. Okay. Cavernous, and it was all in the hope of attracting Olympics. It never happened. They never showed up. And I remember being there in the nosebleeds. I mean, these are the nosebleeds of the nosebleed seats. This is 1980s, 1987. The Cleveland Indians are predicted to win the World Series, right? Out of nowhere, right? Lose 101 games that season. Okay. I remember watching games. It was either 88 or I think it was 88 or 89. It's empty. We all have our seats. We're banging on the seats, right? For Corey Snyder to hit a home run in the ninth inning. And he actually did. Okay. So my heart is warmed and won over to this team. I remember all the 90s baseball teams, especially that were incredibly good. The Indians made it to the show, the big show, shall we say, in the World Series in 95 and 97. And for me personally, and maybe and I'll use this, I'll tell this story, and then as a jump over to your story a little bit. My mother had cancer when I was in high school, and my mother would pass away in 1995, and it would be the Indians who would be the ones that helped me keep my sanity, because everything's falling apart, everything's being broken. This other entity that I had given my life over to, shall I say. I had all posters all over all framed posters all over my bedroom, right? All the stuff. I was checking the sports and checking the scores and the stats every day. Where's the standings? All those things. So as my life is crumbling, I'm giving myself over to something that is giving me hope and allowing me to enter into that. And that would actually, as you may not know my story, 2 years later, my father would pass away. And throughout that season was one of the ways that helped me make it through that. So I think that can be an element of that was for me a comfort place. We'll talk about some of the dangers of that moving forward here, but was there something about, what was it for you growing up, that sports that spoke to your boyhood soul?
Well, I think with hockey specifically, the skill level that's required, again, you're on ice on a blade that's that thin. And so to be able to skate at the speed that they can, to be able to absorb those checks that you're referring to being smashed into the boards by someone that's coming so fast, the slap shots that can go 100 or more miles an hour. Yeah, the fighting, okay. But there's just so much action. People are going to get upset with me for saying this, but I always think of soccer as a sport where, I don't want to say there's a lot of standing around, but the scores are 1-0. They're 2-1. They're 2-0.
Yeah.
And hockey, there's just, so I've been involved with lacrosse a lot in my life. And in lacrosse, interestingly enough, someone who really, really, really probably taught me the most about the sport said, we have to keep our feet moving in the sport of lacrosse. He said, in hockey, you can glide at some point, right? You're on skates, and so you can glide a little bit. And in lacrosse, you have to constantly keep your feet moving. And I think of a sport like soccer, and people are going to say, oh my gosh, he's crazy. There's so much athleticism that's required. You're constantly doing running. You have to be in great shape. But when you watch hockey players, when you watch a hockey game, there's no point during a hockey game where you go, boy, this game is really slow. Boy, there's nothing happening out there. Yeah, okay, you get some duds once in a while, but I still don't think you can say those things. I just want to back up to the storytelling that you're doing, though, about what Cleveland did for you. It's just been such a contradiction. I've been in Florida. I've lived here in September, it'll be 24 years now. And when I was leaving the Sabres, there was someone that I had worked with for a number of years, and he and I are still friends to this day. And after I moved to Florida and got settled into Tampa Bay, I told him, that I'm a Lightning fan now. And he said, after all those years working for the Sabres and being a fan, and I said, absolutely. And he said, that's your team. That's who you're rooting for. And I said, absolutely. And he said, Sabres and the Lightning meet in the Eastern Conference Finals. Who are you rooting for? And I said, Tampa Bay. And he said, oh my gosh, you didn't even have to think about it. And I said, yeah, I'm a Lightning fan now. And he said, sign the papers and everything. I said, yes, that is my team. And so when you talk about that Buffalo must be cursed, I sit here and I go, ever since I moved here, might be a coincidence. All I know is that we've won 2 Super Bowls, 3 Stanley Cups, and the Rays have gone to a World Series. So don't point the finger at me, because we've had some really, really great fortunes here in Tampa Bay in the time that I've been a resident here.
That's awesome. And I'll just say this, right? I like to say that my Indians the mascot was murdered in 2020 for political reasons. And then they killed the team name. It's not a bad name, the Guardians, but it's not a team. So being in Texas for 15 years, last year of March, I traded up and became a Texas Rangers fan. Just because I wanted to, because I can't be a Houston Astros fan because they're all cheaters, and you can quote me on this. But it was a pretty good year to choose to become a Texas Rangers fan. So yes, we're talking about 2 sports, but I hear what you're saying, and congratulations on bringing some beautiful things to the state of Florida on that. So let's go back here, Bruce, and I thank you for what you've shared so far, because your passion for hockey is there, and obviously that bleeds over into other sports. So what would you say your life was like as a boy? I mean, what kind of household were you in? What was the environment like? Where did you, if familial wise, get the passion for sports?
Okay, so this was a family of 5. My parents, my sister, my brother, and myself as the youngest. And Catholic household. My dad is Polish. My mom is Italian. Both very devoted to their Catholic faith and raised us that way. And my father, the real kicker in all of this is that my father, because my brother was his firstborn son, my father figured that, okay, he'll be a sports fan. And he was, and he played sports also. And when I eventually developed this interest and was just right there alongside of him, my dad, just thought that was about as good as he could ask for, that I got 2 sons that are both huge sports fans. And it was really that we were following his model. Now, I'll brag about my dad until the cows come home, and the wonderful example that he set for us as a Catholic man who is providing for his household, and who to this day, my parents have been married for 63 years.
Praise
and
God.
To this day, he still puts my mom on a pedestal. He'll still tell anybody that will listen, this is my queen. He will just say things that too many men stop saying after 6 years, never mind 63 years. But, he, back in his day, he was a fast pitch softball player. He got to the point where he was also playing baseball so competitively that he tried out for the Detroit Tigers. So, clearly the groundwork had been laid that this was going to be something of a sports household. And then to the extent that he could, because he was a swing shift worker, and so his schedule didn't always allow it, but he would be at our basketball games, at whatever sport we were playing. He was there backing us because he was thrilled that his sons were playing sports. But as I said, Catholic household, I was in the first ever kindergarten class of the now defunct St. Paul's School. So I went there from K through 8. And my brother and sister had gone there. Obviously, they started as first graders. And so there was never any discussion. We didn't know anything. We didn't want to know anything other than the Catholic faith.
Wonderful. Okay, and on the issue of Catholicism, we're going to go there in a minute. I'm going to stay on the subject of sports primarily here just for a moment. So, and I don't want to steal your thunder because I know that you have a fun little story on LinkedIn. Can you what do you said you made peace with something? What's that all about?
When I was a little boy, I would come home from school and I would grab the kitchen chair, push it over up against the wall, and stand up on the chair so I could reach the telephone. And I would call my grandmother and tell her what went on in school that day. And it was always, Sister Richard said this, and Sister Richard said that. And I would tell her everything that Sister Richard was saying. And so here was this little news reporter boy that would come home, and oh my gosh, there was the guy who I referred to before that taught me the most about lacrosse. He once described me as, ask Bruce what time it is and he'll tell you how the watch was made. And I eventually just made peace with the fact that I was blessed with the gift of gab. Instead of all these kind of jokes about it, I thought, this is a gift that the Lord gave me for a reason. And we all have different callings. We all display our faith in different ways. But I very much believe in being bold in your faith. And so when I got the idea for and started Catholic Sports Radio, I thought, this is a gift that he's given me. I've done sports broadcasting. I had already been doing another podcast, doing music interviews for 5 years. And so I thought, this is a gift that I've been given. I've been blessed with the gift of gab. It's not about Bruce talks too much, or like I said, ask him what time it is and he'll tell you how the watch was built. I felt that this is something that the Lord gifted to me so that I could serve people in a way that it's not about me. I'm just kind of literally the mouthpiece to convey messages, whether it's calling a game, whether it's hosting a podcast, or going out and being a speaker. I always believe that it's not about me, it's about him. And I can totally see that in something like being a broadcaster, being a podcaster, being a speaker.
Yeah, I can hear you on that, and I think people have told me that I've had a face for radio, so I decided to take them legitimately for that. But it's curious because I mean you're blending two passions into one with the Catholic Sports Radio podcast, and not many people get to do that, right? You're living your dream in a very real sense. So, how would you say, what is, if you have to define what is Catholic Sports Radio? I mean, you have the words there, but what is that all about? How did you get the idea for this?
Those are actually two very different things. How I got the idea for it was someone, and I'll make this very quick, but someone that we had batted this idea around, and we were going to do kind of a different form of it, to the point where at the time I had been working in the Olympic movement for 10 and a half years. And I decided, this is what I'm going to go do. This job that I've had, traveling the world and going to 2 Olympic Games, I'm going to put in my notice and I'm going to leave and I'm going to go do this faith and sports thing, because it did sound like such a natural fit for me, because I'd always only been Catholic and because I had so much connection to sports. And I was on a business trip, the final one that I would go on. I knew that when I returned, I was going to give my 2 weeks notice. I was in Brazil on a business trip. And, a lot of these trips that I would do, they would always kind of take you on like cultural tours or cultural flavored events. So we were on this riverboat, and as we're going on the Amazon River, I'm sitting below deck and I'm noticing that everyone's disappearing. And I'm thinking, why is everyone going up there? This is fine down here. I know I didn't miss any kind of announcement. So I finally caved in, thought, okay, I'm going to go up top and see, what the attraction is. And when I went up there, it really opened my eyes, and I thought it's the same view as downstairs, but oh my gosh, it looks so much different and so much better. And this is a place that I'm going to pull up a chair and hang out, because it's just a totally different experience up here. And as soon as I did, the Holy Spirit just wrapped his arms around me and said, "What do you see all around you?" And I went, "Well, oh, water. Wow, lots of water." And there's so many stories in the Bible that have to do with water. And I was kind of struck that I was having this moment. And before you know it, I'm then tapped on the shoulder with, "What is your favorite story in the Bible, Bruce?" And I thought, well, gosh, that's easy. It's when the water's getting in the boat and Jesus is asleep and the apostles wake him up. Oh my gosh, you need to save us. And he says, guys, didn't you have faith? So there's a boat on water, right? And then because everything in the Bible happens in threes, I get one more message, which is the story of throw down your nets, let's go be fishers of men. And I thought, that's what I'm about to do. I'm about to throw down my net that has been this job of 10.5 years, this real secure, high profile job with all these great benefits. I'm going to throw down my net and go be fishers of men and do this other thing. And so when that unfortunately fizzled out within less than a year, I never lost the belief in the idea of a mix of faith and sports. I never forgot about it. I never was upset. And as I said before, because I had been doing this other podcast for 5 years, I got the idea that, well, I could just do the mix of faith and sports as a podcast, and I could interview Catholic guests who are current or former athletes, coaches, referees, umpires, clergy, administrators, whatever, about the intersection of their faith life and sports life. And so I launched that, and really, one of the big pillars of Catholic Sports Radio is that it's okay to want to have a career in sports. It's okay to want to get that big contract. And there's so many great benefits to sport, like physical fitness, like learning about teamwork, like good sportsmanship. However, we worship God and God alone. We don't worship sport. And that's really what I've tried to keep at the center of what I've been doing on that show every week for close to 5.5 years. And it's refreshing that the guests get it, that they want to be a part of it. And honestly, Steve, I think that the yes comes so much faster and easier because it's not the same questions that they're used to being asked. I always tell people what Catholic Sports Radio is not. I don't report scores. I don't talk about wins and losses or statistics. And I always say ESPN, Fox Sports, they all got that covered. Like, people don't care what Bruce Wawrzyniak has to say about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yes.
But when you bring this new viewpoint, when you bring this new approach to faith and sports together, and an athlete or a coach or whoever it is hears about it and says, you want to talk to me about my faith life, that I can embrace. And it's just been so refreshing to hear that. Yes, I always think of the people who say no to me, and I want to say to them, but I'm too good of a Catholic boy. Think of Mary's yes. Say yes to this interview, because what it will do for the Catholic Church, think of what it will do for one person in the audience who's going to hear something that you say. And so my yes was easy when the Lord called me to do that podcast. Bruce, look at all this experience that you have. Bruce, look at all this podcasting equipment that you have. And Bruce, you've always only been Catholic, and you have all this sports background to draw upon, and you have been blessed with the gift of gab. My yes was easy to that.
I love it. I love it. I love the fact that one of the things you just shared from your heart was the walking. I mean, the Jesus is asleep in the boat, right? And he is with us, and it may not look that way, but there's something in the midst of that. He is present. If we would simply have the eyes to see that then we're going to, an outlying story is be able to walk on the water, right? That's obviously another situation. And I'd say you're walking on water here, my brother, right? You had to take a jump from a secure, but unfulfilling to you career, even though it was in the sports world, to do something a little different because you were called. I want to call you Matthew here. You were called to the money changers booth, right? That's what you were, and now you're doing something of passion here, and you're playing to the notion of, don't count my sheep, feed them, and you're feeding them in a place where most people. Right. Maybe I've heard of this thing, Catholicism, or maybe I'm claim to be Catholic, but I really love sports. And you're talking about that and trying to paint the intersection here. I think it's really, really beautiful. And for us at the Redeemed Vision podcast, our big, one of the big messages we want to portray is the world we're in as we're drinking from a septic tank. And what is being offered to us is fresh water, right? But do we have the eyes to see it, right? So water, you mentioned the connection of water, like that speaks deeply, deeply here. And I think also one other comment here, as you mentioned, these guests that come on the show. And again, I encourage everyone who is hearing this to just head over to, I believe, CatholicSportsRadio.net and to check out the work of Bruce Wawrzyniak, because we hold these people up as heroes, and on some level they are, but at the root of it, it's been said, don't ever meet your heroes. Right, because for a lot of there's trouble where there's money, there's trouble. Right, it's been mo money, mo problems. Right, as in some lingo. But what do we long for as human beings? We long to be seen, known, and loved. Right, and so when you, my brother, are able to shine a light on, at one time, to quote Mr. LeBron James, right, Father Time is undefeated. Right, and they're going to stop playing sports at some point, but they're going to go on still living. I mean, I know of some football players, NFL players are retiring at 30. Now what? What are you going to do with your game? I think there's another reason why, to speak of the Buccaneers, Tom Brady was trying to hang on for so long, because he knows once that stops, the crowd stop, and you have to go and be by yourself. Who are you? Right. And so for you to highlight that, that I want to see you and help others to see you as a human being and validate you as a human being outside of the sporting world, even though that's an important context, I think it's really beautiful. I don't know if you have any.
Yeah, I had a current National Hockey League player who said almost what you just did. He said, if we're lucky, he repeated himself for emphasis, if we're lucky, we play 10 years, maybe into our age 30s. And he said, so we have our career for maybe a decade. And he said, we have our faith for our entire life. And I thought, my gosh, put that on a tweet, put that on an Instagram quote, because that's exactly what it's about. And I have found, Steve, that as blessed as I have been, because you talked about seeing your heroes, Mark Wahlberg, the actor, he has been on Catholic Sports Radio. I've interviewed Mario Lopez, the TV personality. I've interviewed Lou Holtz. I've interviewed Mario Andretti, and these are all household names. But I think what happens is we get all excited because these are our heroes and they're sexy A-list household names. And then you listen to him and you go, oh, well, they're also just a regular guy that goes to Catholic church like I do. You know, Mark, I was able to find the sports angle was the harder part because he is such a devout Catholic, praise God. At the time he was promoting Father Stu. He's on the cover of every fitness magazine all the time anyways. He had played a boxer back in 2010 anyways. Mario Lopez, I had found out, had just been inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. And there he was on the telephone, just so proud of his Catholic faith. But where I'm going with this is when I interview the men and the women that you look at CatholicSportsRadio.net and you're scrolling through the episodes and you go, I've never heard of some of these people. They are the guy next door. They are the lady who lives next door to you, who is a mom of 3 that also has a job as the assistant track and field coach at the college 5 miles away, and has just this tremendous devotion to her Catholic faith. And I would almost argue that maybe their stories, even though you don't know their names, are a little bit more relatable because they are like the man or the woman who's sitting next to you in Mass on Sunday, as opposed to maybe someone like Mark or Mario or Lou Holtz, even Rudy Rudiger, who had the film Rudy made about him. All these people have been on my show and they've given great testimony, but I get just as excited about talking to the people that I know the audience is going to say, I'm not sure who this person is, but Bruce delivers a good show and I'm interested to hear some witness from somebody different.
That's awesome. That's fabulous. So I want to, our time is getting short. So I want to make sure that I get in a couple pivotal questions, even more. I don't know if it's even more, but other pivotal questions. Spell it out for those who, because I started out our show with a little bit of doubt, right? People who, I have no interest in sports, things like that. How would you link Catholicism, the Catholic Church, the Catholic faith, and sports, right? How can we put those two in the same sentence?
Okay, let me give you a couple of examples. So one of the fruits of the Spirit that come to mind in the context of sports and faith, and I know with the Redeemed Vision podcast, is self-control. Controlling your temper. And I'm thinking of this in a couple of ways. And there's other examples I'm going to give in a minute. But controlling your temper is, sure, athletes in the heat of the game, but sadly, Steve, fans controlling their temper when they're at home and their team is losing and they resort to domestic violence against their spouse. But self-control is things like you're participating in sports and you really need to control your ego and not let that run away. Controlling your finances, that's something that people don't think of. But if you are blessed to have a career in sports and you're making a nice buck, you need to practice self-control so that your finances don't run your life. And you say, look at this sports car, look at this house that I just got that has 7 bedrooms and 9 bathrooms. Controlling your time, right? Working out, you do need to do that, but being disciplined with your time away from the game. And then, there's a couple of virtues, Catholic virtues, that I can very much draw out the mix of faith and sports. One of them is justice. That would be, there obviously have to be rules in sports. There have to be things like discipline, things like suspensions, things of that nature. And then another virtue is humility, which I love the virtue of humility. And I love when I get a guest that you've never met them before. And mine's not even a video podcast. So I'm not even looking at the person, but I can just sense that humility in them. And it does get back to what I said before, that this life is not about us, it's about him. And so we should take the gifts and talents, right? I'm talking about athletics that God has blessed us with, and use them in a way that glorifies him, act as obedient servants with humility.
I love this. I love this. And just a couple of things that come to mind as you're speaking. I mean, I would say highlighting the virtues, I think, is a really important point, Bruce. I mean, that because you do have to learn self-control, right? Especially as if you're a player on any sport, right? Hockey, baseball, anything, right? There's a discipline there. If you're doing football, you might be doing two-a-days, right, of practices, and you got to get to bed, right? I can't be going out to the boys, getting a beer at the bar. It's not going to happen, right? I have to eat right. Why? Because every pound matters. Especially, let's say you're a boxer in a middleweight class, right? You're going to be weighed in, and you got to make sure that you're going to hit that weight there. So it's going to be the requirement of that. But also, like, I want to get an edge, but I want to do it not just legally, but ethically, morally, and I want to do it as I'm called to do this. And I like the other thing that's come to mind is I remember years ago, two baseball players, very famous, Mike Piazza and Mike Sweeney. I think you've had Sweeney on your show. Do I have that correct?
Not yet.
Okay.
If you do, on the list,
he's on the list. All right, good. I think you mentioned you have a huge list. I'm super excited. And Piazza, we got to find to get him on the show. But I remember years ago how in another publication talking about they had a spat and they fought, or I think they came to blows on the field, and then the phone call that was exchanged between the two of them of, I forget who first asked who for forgiveness there, right? And this is a sign to all of us, right? Yeah. And some people get it wrong. Some people, and it's
Sure.
a question. It's like sports has a huge analogy for life, right? It's not just that you play the game or that you win the game. It's how do you play the game? How do we play this game of life, right? And that's where the virtues definitely come in here. And what it comes down to, it starts and maybe ends with possession of self. Do I have possession of self and reliance on grace? Because at the end of the day, right, our game's going to end here. Our time's going to end here, right? And we're going to have to account and go to God. Okay, fine. I gave you the ability to swing a bat. What'd you do with it, right? And how did you give glory to me? Because that's why you were created. And you knew better because you're Catholic, right? Or at least you should have known better, right? In that. These are the hard questions, right? And we can connect this here, and I can ask this question, right? Yeah, you were given the gift of this medal here, of this piece of metal on your finger, Steve, right? But did you love? And gosh, and I take a look at this, I'm like, oh man, I have struck out so hard. And then that comes back to the goodness of our faith, right? There's mercy there, okay? Mercy, seek it in the sacrament of confession, and then I got to seek mercy with my wife and ask for forgiveness and say, can we start over here, right? And maybe she's not ready, right? Maybe I got to work through that. She's got to work through some stuff with this. Maybe she is. And then I've got to commit to a program of virtue and growth here.
Yeah. And I want to add just very, very quickly. Yeah. So the takeaway, audience, is that you don't just do church on Sunday. You don't just go to mass and then you say, I'll see you next Sunday. You take that faith into whatever you're doing, right? So then you say, well, how do I do that, Bruce? These are going to be really, really fast. These are examples that guests have shared on Catholic Sports Radio. There was a former heavyweight boxer. He said, before every match, I would put a scapular in my boots and I would go into my opponent's dressing room and pray with him. Oh my gosh. I mean, that one blew me away. Number 2, a softball player. She said, I would pray a Hail Mary quietly in the dugout to myself before every at bat. So that's simple. Very common ones. And this is like at the rec league level, it's at college level, it's in high schools, is you will hear a lot of teams that will talk about, oh, we have a Bible study. We get together at coach's house on Thursday night, or we get together at Steve's dad's house, or whatever it is. And the 4th one, and I saved this one for last because for whatever reason, it's become my favorite. But there was a guest who talked about when she played soccer and they would do their suicides or sprints or whatever you want to call them. She'd go like that. She'd exhale. She'd look at the teammate next to her, and she would offer that up for that teammate, and she'd run and come back to the line, and then she'd look at the next girl, and in her head she'd be praying and making this sacrifice for Jane, and then she'd go and do that one and come back. Now I'm making this sacrifice for Mary. And so it's very simple. I think, Steve, that people hear about this idea, okay, there's some way I can bring my faith into my sport so I don't have to forget about God until next Sunday. Oh, what does that entail? It doesn't entail anything difficult at all. It can be really big if you want to, and praise God if you do, but it could be as simple as one or more of those 4 things that I just listed that guests have shared with me.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. And actually, I'm going to get this out now so I don't forget here. So obviously big, and this is not a sport that I'm really interested in. It's kind of like hockey, the WNBA, right? And we know that right now, Caitlin Clark is the flavor of the month, maybe the year, maybe of the decade. We'll find out. You got any plans to get her on board, or any ways to get to her?
I was going to say she is Catholic, and she is on the list of potential guests. I've been kind of toying with the idea of, do I request now while it is in season? And as someone who has worked in pro and Olympic sports, I have a familiarity with those type of operations behind the scenes in terms of logistics. And I've also said, or their season isn't terribly long. Do I wait until 2 months into the off season? Please help me pray about it. Maybe someone in your audience is going to say, I've got a great connection to her. Let me get in touch with Steve so he can pass it along to Bruce. There's always that.
Awesome. Well, I will certainly pray. So you heard it here first. We're going to get Caitlin Clark on the on CatholicSportsRadio.net and make that happen for Bruce. I believe in the God of miracles, and so I'm not gonna go small on this. Let's go big and see what the Lord has planned on that, which is beautiful. So let me a couple things here, and then we'll change it up here. For us as fans. Right, we're fans of the sport, right? Or maybe we toss the frisbee around with our kids, things like that. What are some ways that we can begin to bridge the gap between sports and faith, especially as a fan of sports? What and maybe even more. Maybe this is an even better question along those lines. So bridging there. What are some of the dangers also you've seen that's keeping us from living our faith?
I love that you just said that, because on a recent episode, I do a segment very, 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 very near to the beginning of every episode of Catholic Sports Radio called My Ministry Moment, and it's 60 to 75 seconds long. And I will overwhelmingly incorporate a scripture passage into it, but I was doing a commentary on the fact that when the Boston Celtics recently won the NBA championship, I read a day or two later about fans that were getting so carried away and celebrating that they were burning jerseys and they were bullying Dallas Mavericks fans. And that's an opportunity right there, Steve. How do we do it? Well, we recognize that these are our brothers and sisters in Christ, regardless of if they're a fan of the opposing team. And we ourselves are representatives of the church. So if we go out and we behave in that way, how can we expect people to see Jesus in us if that's the way that we're acting after our team won, no less? Can you imagine if they lost, how upset you'd be that some people are going to start fires, which I've seen done before. But, things like frisbee, things like, oh, we're just playing kickball, it's a slow pitch recreational softball league. These are all opportunities to, and my spiritual director, I want to give him the credit for that one. He used to say, Bruce, you don't need to stand in the street corner and preach. That's my job. Just be Bruce and let people see Jesus in you. But if you carry yourself at the ball field, right, a parent who is not belligerent and isn't throwing a tirade against the umpire, if you are showing good sportsmanship, if you're helping your opponent up, he or she falls down, very simple things that all seem like common sense, but that's all signs of good sportsmanship that really reflect being a good Christian. Is it's very fundamental. And so I was reading today about the Tampa Bay Times was writing that they're just fed up with something like a bat flip when someone hits a home run, and they're saying that it happens at every level now. If you're tempted, and that's a really huge word to look out for, if you're tempted to do something that you know has a strong likelihood of leading to conflict, to controversy, well, there you go. You're already one step ahead of the game, but recognize it. Now the next step is avoiding it. And so you don't give in. You run those bases, slap high fives with your team when you get back to the dugout, and feel good about it later. Someone's always got a phone, so there's a video you could watch later. You don't need to showboat and to really diminish the other team and look down upon them and let the ego take over.
Yeah. And I just adding to this, well said, Bruce. And I want to just add, if I can add anything to it, would be, it's been said that the greatest single cause of atheism in the world are Christians who go to church on Sunday and then live their life as if God doesn't exist, right? And so inside and outside the lines, whether we are a player or we are a rabid fan, right, of the Buffalo Sabres, the people there who are in between the lines and outside the lines, they're human beings. Can we see them as our beloved brothers and sisters? Can we see them and realize that emotion's exciting, right? We can get swept up into the moment, right? I get that, right? I do, as a man who has been, who's followed my passions to problematic, dark places in life. But we also know that this is where the grace of our faith comes in, where our reason is to guide our emotions. And that when we encounter a human person who might be able to hit a 98-mile-an-hour fastball, be able to slap a hockey puck at 140 miles an hour, right? I don't even know how. I have no idea what the highest. You can let me know on the.
Let's go with 104, not 140.
100. All right, keep working on it, guys. So maybe Satan can. That's the only guy I really know in the NHL. This is just because they have that physical ability. Well, what if they don't have it? What if they get into a huge accident, become a paraplegic, right? Does that mean they have less value or worth, or on a less traumatic area, they miss the winning field goal, right, to win the Super Bowl? Does that mean like that they are a dog and should always be treated that way? Or Bill Buckner in the 86 World Series, ball goes right through his legs, right? And yes, he's now a household name. I have daughters who play softball, and I call them Buckner, and they know what I'm talking about. We joke about it. But like at the end of the day, it's Bill Buckner, William Buckner, son of God. I don't know what his faith life is like, but within that, right, he has a value unto himself. So can we see that? I think it's critically important. That's why I love what you're doing with Catholic Sports Radio, to be able to highlight this. These are real people. They have real problems, and one day they're going to be naked. They're going to be naked before the Lord, naked in who they are, and have to give account for everything they do. How are they in between and outside the lines? And guess what? The same thing's going to happen to us. So that, my brothers and sisters, that's a bit of humility, and we'll take that place, like Christ says, when you come to a wedding, to a banquet, take the lowest place. You're coming to a sports banquet, shall we say. This is lovely. I like this analogy, right? We come to a sports banquet where they're going to be playing on these are some of the greatest players playing this amazing game, and the best players of the world, right? In that place, right? To have a little bit of humility in how I see them and how the other participants that are there. And I think that's going to add for a much better viewing experience for all.
Yeah, for people who are part of a Christian networking group, Christian fellowship group, I was part of one where somebody showed up one week, and the night before on Monday Night Football, he said, look, so-and-so got hurt last night for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And shame on me that I don't remember. It's probably been a good, 6, 7, 8 years now. Yeah. But he's, here we're sitting in Tampa Bay, right? But he says, this is a brother in Christ. We need to pray for this man that he'll be okay. And unfortunately, he wasn't. But so to show up at a Christian networking group in Tampa Bay and say, we need to pray for this man who plays for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that's exactly what you're describing, Steve, is uniting, coming together, asking someone, can I pray for you? You know that they got hurt. playing softball, going over and helping up someone from the other team. Are you okay? It doesn't matter what uniform you're wearing at that point. This is a brother or a sister in Christ who has literally fallen, and now sports goes away. Now this is a time where it's pure humanity, and you want to do for them exactly what they would do for you if you were the one laying on that field.
Yeah, and I think Bruce, you are cutting me to the core in what you're saying, because I am a type A guy. I want to win, and I want to win so badly, right? And especially in sports, I've played some sports, right? Nothing necessarily to write home about, but within that, right, I can get caught up in the focus of winning the game, as opposed to winning relationship, being present in that, right? And again, at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's about, how did I love my brothers and sisters? How did I love the least of mine? And I think the message to me is we've all seen those stories of on track and field, where one of them falls down, right? Maybe it's one of these physically handicapped races, and one of the players or multiple players, they all stop before they get to the finish line. They go back, they pick them up, maybe even like literally carry them, and they carry them over the finish line, right? That's the point here. We want to get over the finish line, and we want to do it together. So let's do it together. So this is beautiful. Bruce, any final thoughts on this section of our conversation?
No, as I said before, I think it bears repeating. There's guests that you've not heard of that are giving great testimony, and I think the poster boy for Catholic Sports Radio was on episode 2, 5.5 years ago. Episode 1 was me just talking by myself and saying, "Welcome to Catholic Sports Radio. This is who I am. This is what the show is going to be." But on episode 2, there was someone who had gone out and he scored the overtime winning goal in ice hockey in college to give his team the national championship. And he was good friends with Father Mike Schmitz. And Father Mike Schmitz called him up the next day and said, "Congratulations, man, you're a national championship, scored the winning goal. I saw the game last night. Amazing. What a crowd. 19,000 sold out." And he's listening. "Yes, Father. Yes, Father. Yeah, it was great." And he says, "That has to be like the absolute number one highlight." And he says, "Well, it's up there. But when I receive the Eucharist at the Easter Vigil, that is going to be the number one highlight." And to put someone like Father Mike Schmitz in his place and stop him dead in his tracks, I thought, you can't find a better billboard for Catholic Sports Radio than the second ever episode, and him telling that story, because that is having perspective. That is seeing that, yes, as I said earlier, sports are great and there's a lot of great benefits to it. But he's talking to me about a goal that he scored a few years ago. He's not playing hockey anymore. He remembers it. It's a great memory. But here he is, so fully engaged in his Catholic faith on a regular basis.
I love it. I love it. Gosh. Oh, okay. So everybody, go back to episode 1 and start there. Okay. It might take you less than 5.5 years, but if it doesn't, well, then you got something to listen to. Bruce, this is a trip. I love it. And we're going to literally trip over to something very different. We'd call this the 12. This is very different. As I said to you off air, this has nothing and everything to do with what we just talked about. So it's going to help our audience get to know you a little better. So these are going to be 12 questions. Don't overthink them too much. Okay. And then we'll go from there. Are you ready?
I am.
All right. Number 1, peanut butter, crunchy or creamy?
Creamy.
2, if you could be any Star Wars character, who would you be?
This is where I admit that I'm not a Star Wars fan.
That's fine. All right. Here we go. Okay. All right. So you may be my first guest to say that, and we won't shame you too bad, but here we go. Okay. Number 3, if you were trapped on a desert island, and you can be literal or you can be pick anything you want, what would be the one food you would want there?
Pizza is what popped into my mind, so probably pizza. I can have pizza 7 days a week, so I might as well have it on the desert island too.
You, sir, like college sports a little too much. All right, good. Number 4, beer or wine?
Beer.
Follow-up question: which one? What kind?
Miller Lite.
Miller Lite. Okay, awesome. There you go. Number 5. What is the most memorable Christmas gift you received growing up?
Atari 2600.
Oh, dude. Okay, we're gonna totally geek out for a moment. Yeah, with the joy, it had one button, right, and it had the joystick on there. Okay, so what?
Yep.
Top 3 games? We're follow up with top 3 games,
Oh boy.
or any 3 games. We'll go there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking of things like Space Invaders, Asteroids, Pac-Man. There was another controller that had a wheel on it, and that's literally all it was just a wheel. But oh my gosh, I ended up getting so carried away and had so many cartridges of so many different games that nowadays people would laugh at and say, "You enjoyed that back then?"
Let me tell you though, like there's a push back to go back to retro. Like with I know Nintendo came out with like a set of 30 on a system. We have a Super Nintendo with that 30 on there. So yeah, my heart is a little warm right now, even though I don't play video games anymore. But I hear you on that. 6. What's your bucket list country or city?
I think this would be, well, so technically I believe it's Indonesia, but to go to Bora Bora. That's yeah.
Why?
I think that why? Because of the movie Couples Retreat with Vince Vaughn and Jon Favreau and Jason Bateman, where they went to the St. Regis Bora Bora, and like the overwhelming majority of the movie took place there, and it was just so gorgeous that to this day, my wife and I, that's like the only bucket list, like dream vacation, like that's our goal, is to one day get to Bora Bora. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I follow the St. Regis Bora Bora on Instagram just because I have to live vicariously through their beautiful pictures that they post. And if they want to fly me down there, or sponsor my podcast or both, like, oh yeah, there's no question that might be I'm not joking when I say that might be the only place on my bucket list in terms of, dream vacations or whatever. If you say, okay, what about a bucket list concert? To me, that's different. But yeah, Bora Bora, no doubt.
Wow.
French Polynesia, by the way. French Polynesia is what Bora Bora is considered.
Well, my brother. All right, everybody who's hearing this, go to his podcast and make a donation. So Bruce and his wife can go take their anniversary trip next year. I love it. Bora Bora. That is a first for the Redeemed Vision podcast. I love it. 7. If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Just like any boy who's thought about that for years, it's always being invisible, just so you could do cool things and go cool places and nobody knows that you're there. You wander around and you look and see how things are, meetings that are formulated where people are coming up with cool ideas and just kind of, like I say, goofy little boy stuff where, and then you picture the old movies, right, from back in the day where somebody would be invisible and the only way you could see him, they'd always put a hat on him or they'd always put those silly glasses on him. And ultimately it was always a trench coat, which I thought was so strange. Like, why not just a sweater? But yeah, being invisible is cool because, you can kind of scare people, push their fork on the table and it moves by itself. And then they turn to swing. And of course, they're going to miss you because you're going to duck. So I've not spent too much time thinking about this, mind you.
That's fine. I think it's fun. Everybody who's hearing this, watch out for Bruce on April Fools. Okay. Number 8. Have you watched The Chosen?
Have I watched The Chosen? Yeah, of course.
Okay. So follow-up question. You can only pick one. Favorite episode?
Oh boy. I'm not really good. I'm not really good with favorite episode questions of just TV shows in general.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean that's just been, it's been so good to see that show do as well as it has, especially because it was so grassroots, and because people have just embraced it from various denominations. Right? It's not a Catholic driven production, and yet Catholics have flocked to it the way that Baptists have, the way that Lutherans have, the way, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, you can tell I'm a big fan.
I love it. Okay. Thank you for sharing. Number 9, if you could get everyone to see the world as you do, what would that look like?
As as fundamental as this sounds and perhaps corny, really just the golden rule, doing unto others, because it's overkill. It's interesting that it's so overkill these days, the evils of social media, and yet we don't do anything with that. All we do is talk about it. All we do is talk about how bad social media can be. And the fact that there's bullying that goes on through social media, the fact that people are diminishing their own opinion of themselves because they see things on social media that they feel they could never achieve. It all boils down to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. If you're trying to be boastful on social media, if you are posting things that are just laden in controversy, is that what you want back? And again, now let's go back to talking about the recreational softball game on a Tuesday night, and you fall down and the person on the other team looks like, is a trainer going to come out here? Because it ain't going to be me. Well, come on. All these things can be boiled down to something as simple as the golden rule: do unto others as you have them do unto you. And think about that, audience. When you're in traffic and you want to flip someone off or speed and cut them off, these are everyday occurrences that, would you want someone to do that to you? Well, no, because then I'd go, exactly. So I'm sorry, you can see that this is a hot button topic with me, but maybe I look at the world through rose-colored glasses. I don't know. My wife and I moved a year ago, and where we live now, it's a lot quieter. And I think it really gives you more of a awareness of peace and being peaceful. And that comes with the golden rule, is being peaceful with one another.
Yeah, no, I think it's beautiful, and I would not. I don't think it's cheesy or whatever adjective you used on this. I think it's critically important, and I think the fact that we've lost that, and that connects with this idea of redeemed vision, seeing the world as God sees it. Right? Are we capable of really doing that? Right? Because if we can't, we're in trouble. We're in trouble, and this is why we need to recover this in a big, big way. So. No, I love that.
One thing that I've seen as I've traveled for business around the country, and I'm getting choked up talking about it, is the homeless problem that we have. And it breaks my heart. Too many people want to look away or get scared or conjure up these thoughts. And I look and I just get welled up with emotion, because these people are no different than I am. They're no different than you are, Steve. They're no different than the people in the audience. And so you have to have that heart and not judge people and look and say, hey, you don't know what their story is. Oh my gosh, look at that guy over there. Do you know that guy? No, look at him though. Well, what about him? You don't know him. The people that are posting on social media, all these wonderful things, they may have an entirely different life behind there that you don't know what they're really dealing with. People that are making it look like their business is successful, and they are getting by the skin of their teeth. Yes. So I'm sorry. I know this is supposed to be a rapid fire thing, and I've said too much, but yeah.
No, please don't apologize on that. And you're speaking to one of the depths of my heart, right? Is the only separation between the homeless and us is finances. That's it. If not for the grace of God, there go I, as St. Augustine would say, right? So, and we need to keep an eye on that, especially, let's take a look at grocery bills from 4 years ago. There are a lot more here, and we're going to see a lot more of this struggling, right? And maybe it's you who are hearing this podcast here. So this is a gut check, really, that maybe if I enter in and I serve others and enter in, then if I get down on my luck, there are others who are going to be a support system for me, and it's not the government on this, right? And I'm not going to go political on the show here, but that's an important aspect for us to look at here. I love that. Very, very important. Number 10, besides your name and date, what do you want written on your tombstone?
Loving husband, loving stepfather. I'm so proud to be a stepdad. And dare I say, devout Catholic.
Praise the Lord. Dare indeed. 11. You can only pick one, and you can't pick Mary. Who's your favorite saint?
I've been asked this before, and there's a boy, oh boy, and I know you're asking me to pick just one. Uh, someone's gonna contact me and say, I heard you interviewed and you said Saint Benedict, and yet I heard you on another show where you said someone else. I'm going to say Saint Benedict today to you because I'm an oblate to the Saint Leo Abbey, and so we are very much a Benedictine way of life. We have classes where we learn the rule of Saint Benedict, and I find that really does align with a lifestyle that I want to be reflective of, that really speaks to my heart, as a Catholic Christian. So Saint Benedict obviously set a great example that I have embraced so much that for purposes of this interview, I'm going to say Saint Benedict today.
I love it. Learn the rules, play the game well. I'll take that. Saint Benedict. Number 12, Bruce, why be Catholic?
I almost want to say why not, and sadly, too many people out there will tell you why not, and that's part of why I'm doing Catholic Sports Radio. We're losing too many people for various reasons, but I hope that my ministry will reach people. I always say that there's 3 different groups out there: the people who have completely fallen away from the church, and amazingly, they're going to hear Catholic Sports Radio and say, I guess I should start going back to church. The second group is the people who are going to Mass every Sunday, but they're just going to say that they went. They're not engaged at all. They're just checking the box. And maybe they hear Catholic Sports Radio and say, I need to pay closer attention and really start getting dialed in. And the third group is the people who are already on fire for their faith. And maybe they hear Catholic Sports Radio and say, I'm going to get even further involved. Maybe they join another ministry at their parish. There's so many things about the Catholic faith that, as we've talked about throughout this conversation, and as I do with Catholic Sports Radio, that it's just such a beautiful blueprint for our everyday life. And there's so many self-help books. There's so many counselors, and I say that with all due respect, but the Bible is the playbook. If I can go to the Bible every episode of Catholic Sports Radio and find something that I can tie into sports, I a lot of times will kind of tie it into our daily lives, whether it's our job, whether it's, like you just talked about, struggles with finances, whether it's struggles in a relationship. All this stuff blends together so well. And, I'm biased because I've always only been Catholic, but to receive the Eucharist on a regular basis, and my gosh, the amazing feeling that comes from walking out of the confessional. Oh my gosh, I almost would put that one right up there in terms of why be Catholic. When I hear about other people and their methods of feeling that they've been forgiven, let me tell you, when I walk out of the confessional, I know that I have been forgiven and I've been absolved of my sins. So, yeah, why be Catholic? Oh my gosh, I wouldn't have it any other way.
That is a beautiful way to, I would say, pause our conversation, because I'm sure Bruce will continue to talk. And as a spoiler alert to any of those who are watching this, as you're going to hit the bell and share this podcast with others. Redeemed Vision podcast is now becoming a big fan of Catholic Sports Radio, not just because Bruce is on this show currently, but because we are going to, through Freedom Coaching, be a sponsor for the work here and help Bruce and his wife get to Bora Bora. It's going to be amazing. No, but I think there's a good match here of those men and women who have an interest in sports, but know that something's off, especially regarding the issue of chastity. And if we can be of service there, then we're honored to be able to do that. So, Bruce, an honor to be here. What's any closing thoughts here, and what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I was going to say I'd be remiss if I didn't reiterate. Interestingly enough, CatholicSportsRadio.com will also work the same way as CatholicSportsRadio.net. They'll both get you to the same place. There are a few logos on the website of the predictable podcast platforms, but I always like to say, if you just search for Catholic Sports Radio almost anywhere you listen to podcasts, you will find it. I'm tempted to say that a new episode comes out every Monday. Maybe Wednesday is your day when you're going to listen. It doesn't matter, but I'd be thrilled for people to listen to Catholic Sports Radio. I know there's some great faith and sports stories being on there. And by all means, if you want to contact me, do so through the website, do so through Catholic Sports Radio social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I know I'm supposed to say X, but I'm still stuck on saying Twitter. All the links are there on catholicsportsradio.net for those platforms.
Awesome. And Bruce, it's an honor to have you, you and your wife and your stepchild, as well as your podcast, are in our prayers. And we'll connect right after we're finished here. So for all of you who have been listening and paying attention to this, I just want to encourage you, right? Dig into the things that you love, the things that God is calling you to. And if it's sports, and love it. Enter into it, but also realize that that is a means. It's not an end, but it's a means, it's a means to get us into the heart of God, so we can get to, I like to say, the greatest show up in heaven with all the angels and saints to play there. So until our next performance, shall we say, our next sporting outing, this is Steve Pokorny with the Redeemed Vision podcast. And remember, nothing is wasted. Everything is redeemable. May everything we do give glory to the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. God bless.
The Redeemed Vision podcast is an outreach of Freedom Coaching. To learn more, check out freedom-coaching.net and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and MeWe.